Hey guys, tonight we begin somewhere cold, quiet, and faintly ridiculous. You're trudging along the edge of a fjord, boots crunching through thin patches of snow and squishy moss. The sky above you is the color of unbaked dough, and the wind smells faintly of salt, pine, and whatever Odin had for breakfast, likely mead and philosophical regret. You're here on what was supposed to be a simple walk, clear your head, admire a glacier, maybe chat with a passing goat spirit. And then, of course, you trip over it. The rock. It doesn't look like much, about the size of a small badger, lumpish, gray, with one side slightly flatter than the rest. But when your boot hits it, something weird happens. The rock hums. Not loudly, not musically, just hums. Like a sleepy refrigerator. Or a god with laryngitis. You stare at it. It hums again, a little louder. You poke it with a stick. It stops. You poke it again. Nothing. You start to walk away. It hums once more, louder still. That's when Odin appears, naturally. Because nothing attracts him faster than an unsolved mystery that smells vaguely divine. He's wrapped in a heavy cloak stitched with bits of frost and stubbornness, his one eye narrowing as he looks down at the humble humming stone. Well, he says in that gravel meets poetry voice of his, this seems unnecessarily mysterious. You nod. He nods. The rock hums. Odin kneels beside it and places one weathered hand on its surface. It has no name, he murmurs. You blink. It's a rock. Exactly, he says. Everything deserves a name. You squint at the rock. It looks back at you. Probably. It's hard to tell with rocks. So begins the saga of how the Allfather of Norse mythology spent 3 full days trying to name a pebble. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rock hums again, and Odin settles in for the long haul. The first thing Odin does, naturally, is sit cross-legged in front of the rock and stare at it for an uncomfortable amount of time. You try to match his focus, but your nose starts itching almost immediately, and there's a small, insistent bird yelling at a pine cone nearby. Odin seems unaffected. He's entering that strange trance that only happens when a deity of wisdom meets an object that's slightly out of place. This is not just a rock, he declares. You squint. It looks very much like a rock. It wants something, he insists. The rock wants something. He nods gravely. And until we name it, it can't be at peace. You're not sure whether this is prophecy or just his version of a midlife crisis. But either way, Odin starts making a mental list. Something simple, he mutters, but layered. Evocative, but grounded. Not too pompous. You suggest Rocky and are nearly struck by a lightning bolt of divine side-eye. No, Odin says flatly. This rock hums. It has presence. It needs poetry. You're about to argue when Hugin and Munnin arrive, flapping and dramatically like they just returned from scolding a glacier. The 2 ravens circle overhead, then land on either shoulder. Well, Odin says. Hugin caws first. Name it Stonewith. Munnin caws back. No, name it Bleeble. They argue for 10 full minutes. Odin takes furious notes, and then tears them up. The rock deserves better, he sighs. You tap it experimentally with your boot again. It hums, then stops. Maybe it likes silence, you suggest. Odin frowns. No one truly likes silence. They just don't have the right words yet. That feels a little pointed, but you let it go. The sky grows darker. Snow drifts lazily onto Odin's cloak. You offer him a piece of jerky. He accepts it absent-mindedly while continuing to brainstorm. Name possibilities, he says aloud. Humulus. Nice whisper. Wobble throne. No, too ironic. You lie down on your back, watching clouds bump into each other like sleepy sheep. The rock hums again, and somehow it sounds unimpressed. Scholars still argue whether this moment marked the beginning of the Great Norse naming pause, or just the longest possible excuse to avoid paperwork back in Asgard. But you Lying in the cold with jerky crumbs on your chin, begin to suspect something deeper. This rock might be waiting for its name. And Odin is not the kind of god to walk away from a naming challenge, especially not one that hums. By morning, Odin has constructed a full naming matrix out of twigs, moss, and the leftover crusts of his emergency travel bread. You wake to find him drawing strange runes in the snow with a pine branch, mumbling to himself about etymological root systems and cross-cultural resonance. The rock hasn't moved, but it has a light dusting of frost now, and it's still humming, just barely, like it's muttering in its sleep. You offer Odin a cup of pine needle tea. He accepts it solemnly, as if drinking it might unlock some hidden name buried deep in the rock's granity soul. "All right," he says at last. "We need outside perspectives." Before you can ask what that means, Odin pulls out a tiny horn and blows it with all the force of a tire god who hasn't named a stone in several centuries. The wind shifts, snow swirls, and Loki arrives, looking suspiciously well-moisturized and entirely too amused for someone just summoned to help name a rock. "Is this an intervention?" he asks, stepping over your sleeping bag and dramatically flipping his cloak. "Because I didn't bring snacks. We're naming the rock," Odin says without looking up. Loki blinks. "Oh, of course. Because it's that time of the millennium. You expect him to mock the situation. Instead, he walks over to the rock, crouches down, and whispers something to it. The humming pauses, then resumes. Odin raises an eyebrow. "What did you say? Wouldn't you like to know?" Loki replies with a grin. "But for the record, I vote we let the rock name itself." There's a long pause. Then Odin says, "Absolutely not." The rock hums again, louder this time. You could swear it sounds like it's laughing, very politely, but definitely laughing. Loki suggests a few names off the top of his head. Greg, Sir Pebbleton, Hummy McFlatface. Odin throws a pine cone at him. It misses. You try to help. You suggest Echo Root. Odin nods thoughtfully, but ultimately dismisses it as too elvish. Loki suggests Thumb. Odin ignores him. Then Odin tries to focus. He sits beside the rock, closes his eye, and meditates. Minutes pass. Snow thickens. You count 12 ravens now, all watching quietly, probably judging you. Finally, Odin opens his eye and whispers, "Crumble fist." The ravens tilt their heads. The rock hums disapprovingly. And somewhere far off, Thor sneezes. The name is rejected. Again. Loki sighs, lies down next to the rock, and mutters, "I hope you know what you're doing, old friend." The rock says nothing. But the hum seems softer, as if it's thinking. The second day dawns foggy and weirdly moist, like the world itself just stepped out of a long bath and forgot to towel off. Odin is still at it. Still staring. Still muttering. He hasn't blinked in what feels like hours. You're pretty sure that's not healthy for mortals, but gods play by different rules, and sometimes with different dice. The rock remains silent, except for its signature hum, which today carries a slight bassy undertone. You try humming back. It doesn't respond. Maybe it's just shy. Then Huggin and Munnin return again with what they claim is a breakthrough. One drops a small scroll at Odin's feet. The other lands directly on your shoulder and recites, "O mighty king, consider Moskai." Odin doesn't even flinch. Munnin adds helpfully, or maybe Stonefella. You don't know whether to be impressed by the Raven's commitment to mediocrity or worried about their creative limitations. Odin sighs, leans back against a tree, and sketches a chart in the snow, emotionally evocative versus elementally accurate. Loki reappears around midday, juggling what appeared to be enchanted chestnuts. Still naming the rock, he asks, catching all three without looking. "Yes," Odin replies tersely. "Why?" Odin doesn't answer. Instead, he gestures at the rock and says solemnly, "Because it resists. It waits. That means something." Loki drops a chestnut. It rolls under the rock. Neither of you bothers retrieving it. By late afternoon, Odin's new suggestion is whisper bump. You try to keep a straight face. You fail. Loki openly snorts. That sounds like a troll's allergy attack. Odin throws a second pine cone. It hits a tree. The tree wobbles but does not fall. The ravens applaud. As the day stretches into evening, you all sit in silence. There's nothing left to suggest for now. The cold settles in. Even Loki seems oddly contemplative. Then Odin speaks, as if announcing the birth of a star. This rock is a mystery wrapped in granite. Quiet epic. An unmoved mover. You nod slowly. So, we still don't have a name? He shakes his head. But we have progress. The rock hums. And it sounds ever so faintly, like it agrees. By the time dawn pokes its lazy fingers through the clouds again, Odin has dragged in a crew of traveling poets, 2 confused dwarves, and a goat named Mildred. You're not sure how he found them or why they agreed to come, but now there's a full naming committee seated around a rock, sipping root tea and offering wildly different suggestions like it's divine karaoke night. The poets suggest things like stone of quiet yearning and gray muse of fjord dreams. Odin considers these for a moment, then rejects them all with a single, majestic eyebrow raise. One of the dwarves proposes thud. The other suggests lunch. They get into a minor argument over which name sounds tastier. The goat just stares at the rock like it owes her money. You begin to suspect that Odin has turned this into some kind of performance art. The rock, still humming, though today it has a slightly warmer tone, like a cat purring inside a kettle. You find it oddly soothing. Odin leans in and listens again. No name fits, he murmurs. Not yet. Then he does something unexpected. He invites you to try again. You clear your throat. You look deep into the rock's surface, at the flecks of quartz, the little hairline cracks, the glint of frost that refuses to melt. Wobble thrown, you offer, half joking. Odin stares at you, then writes it down, and circles it. It has potential, he says. The rock hums once. You're not sure if that's encouragement or indigestion. Just when the meeting seems to be winding down, Freya appears in a swirl of glitter and mild disapproval. She raises one eyebrow and says, "You're still here." Odin explains the rock situation. Freya sighs deeply, removes her boots, and plops down next to you. "Well," she says, "let's get weird with it." You pass her some tea. She pulls out a tiny chime and gently taps the rock. It responds, not loudly, but clearly. A low, musical ring, like a temple bell underwater. Everyone freezes. Odin's eye widens, and Freya just smiles. "Oh," she says, "this one's going to be a drama queen. Word count, 1070. Now that Freya's involved, everything smells slightly of rose petals and justified sarcasm. She's already renamed half the committee. The poets are now emotion consultants. The dwarves have become texture analysts. The goat, whom she promptly adorned with a small daisy crown, is now vice chair of vibes. Odin, to his credit, is rolling with it. He even added glitter to the naming chart, though he insists it was strategic stardust. You sit next to Freya as she runs her fingers over the rock. Smooth, she muses, but not boring. Has secrets. Possibly a past life as a doorstop for a thunder god. The rock hums appreciatively. It's evolving. The hum is more tonal now. Less kitchen appliance, more lullaby gone wrong. And each time someone gets close to a good name, it changes frequency, like a mythic version of warmer/colder. Freya suggests Glumble. Odin scoffs. The goat bleats. You suggest Echonup. Loki, who's now balancing on one leg atop a stump, applauds. Odin is quiet for a long time. And then, we must consider ancient languages. The lost tongue of the frost giants. The silent grammar of glaciers. You nod slowly, pretending to understand. Freya mutters, "He gets like this." To test a theory, you start naming nearby objects. Spoon. Nothing. Snow splat. No hum. Root crunch. A faint response. Freya leans in. Try a name that sounds like it forgot itself halfway through. Tharnable. Hum. Odin jumps to his feet. That was it. Or close. Or a cousin of it. The ravens flap in excitement. One drops a pine cone of approval. Freya grins. We're circling it. The rock hums, then gives a tiny, nearly inaudible click. You all freeze. Loki whispers, "Did it just say something?" The wind picks up slightly. You lean closer. Nothing more. But you could swear the rock feels warmer. Scholars still argue whether this moment marked the first semi-verbal communication between stone and God, or if the rock was just settling from the temperature shift. Either way, Odin starts translating. And the naming continues. It's the middle of the third night now, and sleep is a suggestion none of you are taking seriously. You're all seated around the rock like campers who forgot to bring marshmallows but accidentally summoned a cult. Freya has braided the goat's beard into a ceremonial loop. Loki is rearranging pine cones into what he claims is a semantic or a field. Odin, bless him, is still workshopping names that sound like lost IKEA furniture lines. Snorful, he offers. The rock responds with a dissonant hum. Rejected. You try Wimblestone. Nothing. Loki tries Greg again, just to annoy everyone. It works. Then something shifts. Not the rock. You. Because after nearly 3 days of whispered guesses and glowing names that flicker and vanish, you realize something odd. The rock has already been named. Not by Odin. Not by Freya. Not even by the goat. But by itself. You stand. You walk around it. You place your hand on its surface. The hum shifts, mellows, settles into a warm resonance that feels like tea in a wooden cup. Wait, you say. What if it's not waiting for a name? Everyone looks at you. What if it's sharing one? Silence. Odin blinks once, then slowly nods. Sympathetic naming resonance. Of course. Freya leans in. Which means, Odin explains, some beings, especially old, unmoved things, don't want to be named. They want you to remember them. Freya places her hand beside yours. The hum intensifies, but it's no longer just a sound. It feels like wind and ink and sleep and time passing slowly through moss. You feel a name rise in your chest. It doesn't translate well. It isn't made of syllables. It's more of a shape in your mind. A smooth bend, a slow echo, the weight of something content. You whisper, Kerm. The rock hums softly, like a thank you. Loki says nothing for once. The goat sneezes. And for the first time, Odin smiles like a man who isn't trying to win something. You awaken the next morning to find Odin seated next to the rock, talking to it in a soft voice like one might use with a particularly aloof cat. Good morning, Kerm, he says reverently. May your stillness never dull. You stretch and sit up, the snow beneath you now sculpted into accidental furniture by the many days of mythical brainstorming. Freya's brewing something that smells faintly of cinnamon and pine needles, and Loki's wrapped in a bearskin cloak he definitely didn't have yesterday. Kerm, he repeats, trying out the name like it's gum he hasn't decided if he likes yet. Kerm. That's either profound or deeply underwhelming. I love it. The rock hums its approval. Again. It's really into being called Kerm now. Freya walks over and brushes some frost off its side. Now that it has a name, what happens next? Odin blinks slowly. We write it down, and he does. He carves the name into a smooth slab of bark with his smallest, fanciest dagger. It glows briefly before settling into the wood like it's always been there. Munin suggests framing it. Huggin suggests selling it on Divine Etsy. You, meanwhile, start to feel something odd, closure. Kerm's hum has changed again. Now something steady, rhythmic, almost meditative. Not quite music, but close. Like a lullaby sung by granite. You lean against the rock. It's warm, weirdly so. And then it speaks. Not in words, not even in thoughts, but in understanding. It shares a vision. Towering cliffs bathed in pale sunlight, clouds coiling between mountaintops, a time long before gods walked, when everything was still figuring out how to be. Odin gasps. He sees it too. Freya falls silent. Even Loki looks serious. You all sit with it for a long while, unsure whether the rock has blessed you or simply allowed you to witness something older than thought. Scholars still argue whether the rock actually had consciousness or if it merely echoed the intent of the beings around it. Either way, it is named now. And content. Now that Kerm has been officially named, Odin insists on throwing what he calls a quietly majestic naming ceremony. Freya calls it a glorified picnic. Loki calls it Tuesday. You call it surprisingly touching. The clearing around a rock is now lined with small torches that give off a gentle golden glow. No fire, just light, like friendly will-o-wisps on their lunch break. A circle of flat stones serves as seats. The goat has been upgraded to Director of Ceremonial Chewing and is enthusiastically testing each seat's legroom by licking them. Odin steps forward with a thin scroll in one hand, reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He clears his throat. Let it be known, he begins, that on this 9th hour of the 3rd day, under skies both indifferent and mildly overcast, we gathered in the presence of Kerm, the rock formerly known as that lumpy thing near the stream. A moment of solemn silence follows. The ravens croak approvingly. Odin continues, Kerm has shared with us its stillness, its hum, its utter refusal to be conveniently categorized. And for that, we are thankful. Freya raises a cup of pineberry wine. To the rock, who made us slow down. To Kerm, you echo, lifting your own carved mug filled with something suspiciously fizzy. The rock hums in a pleasant G-sharp. Loki, not to be outdone, presents his gift, a tiny, crown-shaped pebble, which he delicately balances on top of Kerm. So it knows it's royalty now, he says. But humble royalty. Local royalty. Like a mayor. The goat sneezes loudly. Odin declares that a sign of approval. You lean back against Kerm again, and the hum deepens into something like a purr. You're not sure where this story ends, if it ever does. Some say that naming something is just the beginning. That once a name is given, a whole identity unfurls around it like mist. Others say it's just a rock. But Kerm hums on. And somehow, it's listening. That evening, after the official ceremony, things mellow into what can only be described as divine loitering. Freya starts sketching the rock from 12 different angles in her leather-bound Mythical Mood journal. She says she'll title it Study in Stillness and Stubbornness. You suggest adding the goat's chewing silhouette in the background for historical accuracy. She agrees. Odin pulls out a flute made of hollowed antler and starts playing a tune that is technically music, though it seems to confuse the birds. Loki joins in by drumming on pine cones with a pair of bones he found in a nearby clearing. Somehow it works. You just sit beside Kerm and breathe. The rock's hum has evolved again. Now it pulses gently, almost like it's syncing with your heartbeat. You lean in close, rest your hand on its surface, and let the silence between vibrations wash over you like fog rolling through memory. Kerm isn't speaking in words, but in ideas, tiny bursts of imagery, ancient rivers carving stone, moss growing inch by inch, the passage of time measured in the wearing down of sharp corners. It's oddly comforting. You start sharing stories of your own, just softly. Things you remember from before you arrived here. A tree you used to climb as a child, the smell of toast on rainy mornings, the way your grandmother's laugh would linger in the kitchen longer than she did. Kerm hums in reply. A little deeper now. You swear it's telling you a story in return. One about a time before names, when the world still crackled with potential. About a thunder god who once sat quietly for a century just to learn how to listen. Scholars still debate whether these experiences are divine communion or elaborate projection. They publish papers with titles like Granite Dreams, Psychoemotive Responses to Myth-Embedded Geological Icons. You prefer to call it Sitting with a Rock That Knows Your Soul's Favorite Color. And in the golden hush of the evening, that feels like enough. The next morning, Odin declares a rest day. You think that would mean everyone actually rests, but no. This is Norse mythology. Resting means inventing new categories of mild chaos. Freya builds a shrine of intention out of moss shiny pebbles and the goat's favorite stick. Loki tries to teach the ravens how to juggle pine cones, which leads to a minor midair collision and an avalanche of twigs. You, on the other hand, sit quietly with Kerm, sharing an apple and watching the sky try to decide if it wants to be sunny or poetic. Kerm hums gently, the sound vibrating through the soles of your feet. You feel more grounded than you have in years. The kind of stillness that makes you wonder why you were ever in such a hurry. Odin, now reclined dramatically on a tree stump like a philosopher king at brunch, begins a long soliloquy about the importance of patience in the divine naming arts. He gestures broadly. Even the mightiest gods must occasionally step back and let the rocks speak. Freya responds by throwing a berry at his forehead. Loki starts sketching something in the dirt. A spiral, a loop, a kind of map maybe? I'm starting to think Kerm's hum is directional, he mutters. Like sonar. Or vibes. You lean in. And now that he mentions it, the hum is subtly shifting. Like it's pointing towards something. Not a place, exactly, but an idea. A story fragment. A possibility. You close your eyes. There, just beneath the surface of your thoughts, is a glimpse of another name. One not to replace Kerm, but maybe to add to it. A middle name? A secret title? You whisper it, still rude. Kerm's hum swells, then fades again, like a heartbeat echoing into fog. Odin nods solemnly. Names are never finished, only paused. Freya raises her mug in agreement. To Kerm's still root, the rock that dared to dream sideways. And the goat? It chews approvingly. By midday, things take an unexpected turn. Not dramatic, not dangerous, just unusually organized. Odin has brought out a series of scrolls titled Potential Rock-Adjacent Entities Worth Naming and begins hosting what he calls an informal symposium. There's a stump podium. Freya's goat is wearing a leaf tie. It's getting very official. You sit with Kerm, who now seems mildly amused by all this, its hum sounding like a chuckle translated into stone. Odin's first proposal, a neighboring stump with significant moss presence. Tentative name, Bartholomew. Freya denied. That's clearly a derrick. Loki, we're naming stumps now. I demand we rank clouds next. From your seated position, you suggest, what if we name things not for what they are, but for how they made us feel? The clearing pauses. That idea lands with a kind of sacred hush. Odin rubs his beard. Sentimental semiotics. Revolutionary. Freya nods slowly. Then this rock, she gestures at Kerm, isn't just Kerm's still root. It's also the one who waited without asking. Loki, laying on his back now and flicking twigs at passing squirrels, mumbles, catchy. So begins the era of emotive naming. You all go on a stroll, an informal expedition, and start whispering names to things. A puddle becomes mirror of one honest thought. A crooked tree is dubbed she who almost gave up. A beetle with one shiny wing is now half-luck herald. The act itself is surprisingly soothing, a kind of therapeutic myth-making. You're not just cataloging the forest, you're noticing it, listening to it, giving names not as labels, but as little thank yous. Kerm's hum grows fainter, but warmer. You return and sit beside it again. It doesn't need to speak. It just is, and that's enough. Scholars still argue whether Kerm was an actual god or simply a focal point for divine projection. But they all agree, something changed in that forest. You started naming things and ended up remembering yourself. That evening, the air turns syrupy with dusk, and the forest begins its nightly ritual of gentle noises, wind tugging at leaves, birds mumbling to themselves, and the distant crunch of a goat accidentally stepping into the ceremonial berry circle. You lie back beside Kerm, your head resting gently on moss that somehow feels pre-warmed. Above you, the sky stretches into soft pink and sleepy lavender. It smells like bark and wood smoke and something faintly minty, maybe from Loki's experimental incense attempt earlier. Odin wanders over with 2 cups of something he describes as barely fermented, mostly poetic. You sip it. It tastes like starlight and burnt toast, in the best way. He sits beside you, sighs, and mutters, I've never named something that didn't fight back. You look at him. He gestures at Kerm. But this one, it waited. It knew its name before I ever opened my mouth. I just had to listen. Freya joins, settling cross-legged on the grass, her sleeves rolled up and her face dusted with soot from whatever she was sketching into the side of a tree. She doesn't say anything for a long time. Then softly, I think it made us all quieter. In a good way. You know it. Loki, still off in the shadows somewhere, lets out a loud sigh and says, "You're all so sentimental it hurts. I love it. Don't stop." And Kerm hums again. Not just for you this time. It echoes across the glade like a lullaby for the forest. You hear pine cones shifting, birds stilling mid-chirp, the stream slowing just slightly as if to listen. You close your eyes, and you see a time long before now, a place where giants walked softly, where even the gods hadn't yet found their thunder, and where rocks were the first to dream. Scholars still try to translate that vision, to distill its meaning. You just call it being here. And Kerm, the rock, hums on. Morning arrives like a whisper. Not a grand sunrise. No trumpets. Just a slow unfurling of light through the trees, golden and quiet. You wake to find that someone, probably Loki, has balanced a pine cone perfectly atop your head while you slept. Freya is already awake, sketching something with intense focus and a twig dipped in charcoal. Odin is speaking softly to Kerm, the conversation one-sided but oddly respectful, like two diplomats meeting for brunch with no agenda. The ravens, Huggin and Munnin, are bickering over a shiny coin they found in the stream. The goat, now officially referred to as Chuthane of Moss Affairs, is peacefully munching on a ceremonial stick. You sip a warm drink made from bark, berries, and a hint of thundercloud, according to Freya's recipe. It tastes like forest nostalgia. And then it happens. Kerm begins to glow. Just faintly pale blue veins of light pulsing along its surface like a heartbeat remembered from a dream. No one speaks. Not even Loki. You all just watch. The glow doesn't burn or flicker. It breathes. It invites. You place your hand on the stone. And suddenly, memories not your own begin to whisper through your thoughts. Images of ancient gatherings, silent rituals, a time when naming something meant becoming its guardian. You see Odin, younger, less sure of himself, staring at a different rock somewhere far away. You see Freya weaving sunlight through tree roots. You see Loki carving riddles into frozen bark, laughing at his own cleverness. You see yourself, too. Sitting, listening, naming. Kerm isn't just a rock. It's a library, a cathedral, a mirror made of silence. And its hum now carries your name back to you. Not your title, not what others call you, but the name only the forest knows. The name you forgot, but that still fits. Scholars still wonder what happened that day. You remember it as the moment the rock hummed your soul awake. The glow fades slowly, as if tucking itself back in for another few centuries. No one says anything at first. There's nothing to say. You all sit there, breathing in a hush, letting the moment stretch like warm dough. The kind of silence that doesn't ask to be broken. Eventually, Freya murmurs, "Well, that was sacred." Inconveniently sacred. Loki, sprawled upside down on a log, says, "Do you think the rock accepts tips?" Odin places a hand on your shoulder, his grip firm but kind. "You heard it, didn't you?" he asks, though it's not really a question. You nod. And though you're not entirely sure what you heard, or if hearing is even the right word, you know it meant something. Something deep and soft and woven with quiet thunder. You've spent days now naming this rock, pouring stories into it, listening to it hum. But it turns out it's been naming you all along. And the name it chose isn't a sound or a word. It's a feeling. A weight lifted. Breath released. A slow, gentle return to something true. Kerm doesn't glow again. It doesn't need to. It just hums, steady as ever. Odin stands, stretches, and says, "I think we're done here." Freya doesn't move. "I think we just started here." You brush your fingers across Kerm's surface one last time. The hum buzzes up your arm, into your ribs, and settles behind your eyes like a lullaby too soft to hum out loud. As the group begins to pack up, the goat lingers by the rock, nuzzling it with unexpected tenderness. You smile. Kerm has always been more than a rock, more than a name. It's a place, a pause, a permission. And as you turn to leave, the forest leans in just a little closer, like it's proud of you for finally listening. You take only a few steps before pausing to look back. Kerm sits as it always has, unmoving, unblinking, entirely unimpressed by your emotional growth. And yet, the silence around it feels fuller now, as if it's holding space for every story you didn't know you've been carrying. Freya walks beside you, whittling a small wooden charm shaped like a lopsided version of Kerm. "For my travel altar," she says. Also works as a doorstop. Loki is juggling 3 apples and a pine cone. Bet I could convince the Allfather to name a cloud after me next. Fluffy, mischievous, and barely functional. Odin ignores him, of course. He's humming something ancient under his breath. A song too old to remember, too familiar to forget. The walk back through the forest is slow and dappled with light. You notice more this time, how the leaves seem to lean into your footsteps, how the moss puffs up like a greeting, how even the squirrels pause as if tipping invisible hats. Kerm's hum still echoes faintly in your chest. It's no longer a voice, but a resonance. Like when you hum along to a tune you don't know the words to, but somehow understand anyway. You pass the crooked tree you'd named She Who Almost Gave Up. It still stands, defiantly bent, now wearing a small crown of twigs left by Freya. You salute her. And then the glade disappears behind you, swallowed by forest and time. But it doesn't feel like a goodbye. It feels like a soft comma in a sentence still unfolding. Scholars have written volumes trying to trace the significance of Kerm. Entire conferences devoted to deciphering its role in divine memory, psychological myth-weaving, and the ethics of object personhood. You just know you'll visit again. Maybe not soon. Maybe not physically. But Kerm will hum again when you're ready. And you'll hum back. The road away from Kerm leads you into a quieter kind of wild. Not the theatrical sort with lightning and prophecies, but the gentle, soft-spoken wilderness that prefers whispering over roaring. Everything feels padded, muffled, as if the forest is wrapping its arms around your thoughts and patting them softly. Freya pauses to collect a patch of lichen, claiming it's the exact texture of ancient dragon eyelets. "Very niche," she says, "but useful." Loki started a game called Guess That Tree's Regret. He points to a gnarled oak and offers, "Regret, not becoming firewood when it had the chance." You laugh harder than the joke deserves. Odin, for once, is quiet. He walks beside you in long, slow strides, his one eye scanning the sky like it's a book he's rereading for hidden footnotes. After a while, he murmurs, "It's rare to find a story that doesn't want anything." You tilt your head. He continues, "Most myths come with battles, betrayals, or someone being turned into a flaming raccoon. But Kerm, it just existed, letting itself be found." You chew on that. A myth with no demand. No moral. Just a presence. That night, you camp under a canopy of stars shaped like long-forgotten punctuation marks. You imagine the gods once used them to end the kinds of sentences too powerful to be spoken aloud. You sleep easily. Your dreams are soft and wide, filled with nameless animals, sideways laughter, and a glowing rock humming lullabies in a language made of memory. Scholars will later debate whether dreams like these are residual magic or psychological absorption. You know better. You're still in the story, and Kerm is still humming somewhere, not to summon, not to teach, but to be. Just being is enough. Morning arrives with fog, the friendly kind that doesn't obscure so much as soften. Every outline is a little blurrier, every sound wrapped in cotton. Even Loki's usual commentary takes on a dreamy quality, like background dialogue in a storybook you're only half listening to. The path winds through low hills now, each one topped with oddly shaped stones that seem like they could almost be more Kerms, cousins, maybe, or shy siblings who hum only when no one's watching. Freya walks beside you, clutching her tiny carved Kerm charm. "Do you think rocks can miss us?" she asks without irony. You nod. "I think they do it very slowly." She smiles like you just handed her a secret. Odin, ahead of you, seems less focused on direction and more on pacing. He's measuring steps with a string, mapping forgotten resonance lines, he says. Mythical fault lines. Places where stories want to happen. He stops suddenly and places a smooth stone in the center of a fork in the trail. "Let's see what grows from that," he mutters. You continue through a grove where trees grow in spirals. The wind here doesn't blow, it meanders. You find yourself walking slower, pausing more often, letting thoughts arrive at their own pace. You pass a puddle labeled Mirror of One Honest Thought. Someone's drawn a smiley face in the mud beside it. Scholars still argue over the sudden rise in emotive landmarks after the Kerm expedition. Some say it was a cultural movement. Others whisper that the forest itself learned how to speak. You know, the truth is quieter. Kerm reminded everyone that naming is a kind of noticing. That sometimes the most sacred stories are the ones that don't ask to be remembered, just quietly are. And somewhere beneath your ribs, the hum continues. You reach a stream that insists on flowing the wrong way. Not upstream, not downhill, just sideways. As if the water got distracted and forgot gravity was a thing. Freya claps delightedly. This is the kind of nonsense I live for. Odin kneels beside it, dipping his fingers into the current. This stream's been here longer than me, he mutters, and refuses to behave. I respect that. Loki naturally tries to convince it to carry his boots downstream for him. Just one ferry ride. I'll tip generously in compliments. The stream ignores him, as all good rivers eventually learn to do. You sit beside it and feel the Kerm hum again. Lighter now, not a deep rumble, but a soft thrum. Like a thought forming at the edge of sleep. You've left the stone behind, but it hasn't left you. Even the trees seem to have caught on, leaning toward you like old friends wanting to swap secrets. Birds perch closer than usual. A moth lands on your sleeve and lingers far longer than moths are legally allowed to without paying rent. Freya offers you a piece of honey bread shaped like a small rock. In honor of Kerm, she says. And because I accidentally squished the apple pie. You eat it slowly. Everything tastes like something old and important, like the way songs used to sound before people wrote them down. Later, you cross a bridge made entirely of fallen branches and old oaths. Odin stops to whisper something into the railing. Freya listens. He just named the bridge, she explains. Called it Decision-ish Crossing. You nod. Seems fair. You don't know exactly where this road ends, but it doesn't feel like it matters. The myth is still unfolding around you like a story told by someone who knows you'll fall asleep before the ending, and tells it better for that reason. That night, the fire crackles with the sound of distant memories. Not yours, at least not entirely. The flames shift in hues not found on any standard color wheel. Dust orange, lullaby blue, and that exact shade of purple you always imagined dreams might be. Loki tells a story about a goose who accidentally inherited a kingdom. Freya braids her hair with twigs and whispers poetry to her tea. Odin stares into the fire like he's negotiating terms with it. You sit quietly, watching the smoke curl upward into constellations that haven't been named yet. Maybe you'll name one tomorrow. Maybe you won't. The hum is quieter now, but no less real. It lives in the soles of your feet, in the hollow of your throat, in the air between breaths. It's not trying to teach anymore. It's just with you. And you're with it. You realize you haven't thought about the point of this journey in hours. Days, maybe. The pressure to get somewhere, understand something, solve the myth. All gone. All irrelevant. Kerm didn't want to be solved. It wanted to be met. You smile into the fire. Odin finally speaks. Not all names are made of letters. Some are made of time. Freya hums in agreement. And silence. Don't forget silence. The goat sneezes, possibly in support. You lie back on the mossy earth, the stars now drifting like lazy feathers across the ink of night. The forest breathes with you. The wind tucks you in. And just before your thoughts surrender to sleep, you hear it again. The hum. Not loud. Not even near. Just a note carried on wind and memory, and something you left behind on purpose so you'd have a reason to return. You smile, and dream of a rock that waited. Morning finds you already awake, though you're not sure when your eyes opened. The sky is the pale blue of forget-me-nots and old library cards. Dew clings to your sleeves like shy compliments. The fire has gone out, but its warmth lingers, stitched into the moss like a memory you can still wear. You sit up slowly. Stretch. Yawn. The goat is standing suspiciously close to your face, chewing contemplatively. Loki is still asleep, upside down again, possibly dreaming of goose royalty. Freya hums while drawing a map of somewhere that may or may not exist. Odin. Gone. You find him not far off, sitting on a boulder with one foot in a puddle. He's sketching something in the dirt with a stick, circles within circles, a spiral that refuses to end. Just trying to remember the parts one didn't mean to forget, he says without looking up. You sit beside him, saying nothing. The silence between you is comfortable, like two worn sweaters hanging side by side on the same hook. He hands you the stick. Your turn. You hesitate. But then your hand moves, drawing loops and shapes that feel like half-remembered lullabies. A name emerges, not yours, not his. Maybe Kerm's. Maybe the story's. Do you think Kerm will ever move? You ask. Not unless someone needs it to, he says. You nod. That tracks. Together you sit, drawing meaning into dirt, letting thoughts rise like bubbles in a quiet stream. The sun climbs slowly, as if it's not entirely sure today needs to begin. The forest doesn't rush you. Time feels politely optional. And deep beneath the earth, you swear you feel it, the faintest, kindest hum. Not a command. Not even a welcome. Just a hello. And that is more than enough. You return to camp to find Freya attempting to teach the goat how to play tic-tac-toe with pebbles. She's got potential, Freya insists. Very strategic snout movements. Loki, now upright and brushing leaves from his hair, declares that he had a dream where he won a debate against a tree stump. It was a narrow victory, he admits. Stump was quite eloquent. The forest feels lighter today. Not emptier, just less tangled. As if the trees have agreed to lean a little farther back, give you space to breathe. You all pack slowly, like people leaving a picnic, not an expedition. No one rushes. No one gives a speech. The road ahead curves gently, then disappears behind a mossy ridge. Odin leads the way, his staff tapping softly in rhythm. You walk beside Freya, who's still scribbling odd notes in her journal. Name potential for that puddle. Look the honest. You pass an oddly shaped rock, not Kerm, but something in the same emotional family. You instinctively nod to it. Freya touches your elbow. You're doing it too now. Doing what? Greeting the unnamed like it already knows you. You smile. She's right. The further you walk, the more the landscape feels familiar, not because you've been here, but because you've started listening differently. There's a rock shaped like a loaf of bread. A tree that leans like it's waiting for a whisper. A patch of grass that looks like it's keeping secrets from the wind. Scholars will eventually write papers title things like post-Kerm myth-conscious spatial navigation patterns. But you're just walking, naming, noticing, and every now and then the hum flutters through you, not like thunder this time, but like a memory brushing its fingertips against your sleeve. You hum back. You pause atop a low ridge as the sun dips behind a row of pine trees shaped suspiciously like old men nodding in unison. Below, the forest opens into a wide meadow stitched with lazy wildflowers and oversized dandelions that sway like they're gossiping. In the middle, a single boulder, not Kerm, not even Kerm adjacent, just a good, honest rock doing its job. You sit with Freya on a mossy patch and watch the goat chase a butterfly with a determination usually reserved for dramatic opera finales. Loki arrives, tossing a pine cone like it owes him money. Name that rock, he says, pointing. First thing that comes to mind. You blink. Kevin. Loki shrugs. Strong choice. Kevin it is. Freya writes it down. Odin strolls up behind you and looks at Kevin thoughtfully. Not a bad name, he says. A bit modern, but sturdy. Do all rocks deserve names? You ask. Odin nods. They all have one, whether we know it or not. That settles it. You spend the next hour naming things in the meadow. A suspicious bush becomes Clementine the Deceiver. A grumpy puddle gets dubbed Sir Splash-a-Lot, and a particularly dramatic-looking stick is officially registered as Voldmoss. You laugh more than you mean to. Later, as twilight stretches the sky into a sleepy watercolor, Freya points out that the hum feels different here, softer, but still present. Less like a voice, more like a shared memory. Scholars will spend decades trying to classify this phenomenon: hum echo, mythic imprint, sonic archetype resonance. The names get longer, the meanings fuzzier. But for you, it's simple. The story never needed to be understood. Only heard, only felt, only honored. And naming, you realize, is just listening with your whole heart. You leave the meadow at a sideways stroll, the kind of walk reserved for people who aren't quite ready to say goodbye, but know the road won't wait forever. Behind you, Kevin the Rock catches the last bit of sunset like a sleepy eye refusing to close. The goat looks back too, which feels oddly respectful. The trail becomes narrower, cozier, lined with trees who lean in not to trap you, but to listen. They rustle politely as you pass, as if gossiping about your visit. You hope they're saying nice things, or at least weird ones. Odin pauses beside a stream and points at a bent reed. That, he says, is what started the argument. What argument, you ask? He smiles, just slightly. The one where I tried to convince a river that it was a lake. And the river won. Freya chuckles. Wise water. You all keep walking. Time here doesn't pass, it settles. Like tea leaves or old dust. You think you hear the hum again, not in your ears, but in the rhythm of your steps, in the way your fingers swing at your sides. Loki suddenly freezes. Did anyone else hear that? You pause. Silence. Then a soft whirring sound, like wind threading a needle through tree bark. The goat sneezes. Loki relaxes. False alarm. Mythic indigestion. You walk until night wraps around you like a velvet curtain. The stars come out in groups, chatty constellations with opinions about everything. You lie on your back beside a mossy log named Eleanor and breathe slowly. Not to sleep. Not to end the day. Just to exist. Somewhere, Kerm hums in approval. Not because it's the end of a story, but because the story has decided it doesn't need one. And you, lucky listener, are still inside it. The sky is indigo now, dotted with stars that seem just slightly too close, like they're leaning down to eavesdrop on your thoughts. Odin sits cross-legged by the fire, carefully roasting something suspiciously round. It's not a rock, he insists. It's a turnip. Probably. Loki raises an eyebrow. Define probably. The goat munches something with audible crunch and zero shame. Freya passes you a cup of tea brewed from leaves she picked near Sir Splashalot the puddle. Supposed to taste like ancient secrets, she says. You sip. It tastes like mint, cinnamon, and déjà vu. Across the clearing, a shadow moves. Not a threatening one, more like the kind of shadow that forgets it's supposed to stay attached to something. It drifts near the log named Eleanor, pauses as if listening, then melts back into the trees. No one says anything. It doesn't feel strange anymore. You realize, the longer you've walked, the quieter the questions have become. Not because they've been answered, just because you don't need them to be. That's what the hum has been teaching you all along. Not every myth is a puzzle. Some are lullabies. Freya looks up suddenly. Do you think Kerm knows how many people it's changed? You shrug. Do you think it cares? She smiles. Even better. The fire crackles. The goat sighs. Odin finally admits it was, in fact, a rock. Loki claps. Above, a star blinks out. Not gone, just shy. And within you, the hum expands. Not louder, not stronger, but fuller. It's not trying to guide anymore. It's just being. And you are too. You lean back, letting the night settle over your shoulders like a soft story blanket. And somewhere deep inside the soil Kerm, just being a rock, hums back. You dream of moss. Not just any moss, but a particularly confident patch that introduces itself as Gregory. In the dream, Gregory gives you directions to somewhere vague but oddly important, using landmarks like that tree that always looks surprised and the bendy mushroom with opinions. You wake up with a memory of the dream still fuzzy but pleasant, like the aftertaste of a story told in another language that you somehow still understood. The others are already awake. Odin is balancing a pine cone on his head with grim determination. Loki is trying to juggle 3 apples and failing with flair. Freya is humming something hauntingly pretty while braiding clover into the goat's horns. The morning is slow on purpose. No one rushes because there's nowhere left to go. Not really. The journey, you realize, has folded in on itself, not ending, but becoming part of you. Like an echo you carry, like a name that no longer needs to be spoken to be known. You stand up and stretch. The air smells like damp bark, wild mint, and whatever emotion trees feel when they're proud. You walk a little ways from camp and find a flat stone just big enough to sit on. It hums faintly. Not Kerm. Maybe a cousin. You rest your hand on it. Thanks, you whisper. For what, you're not exactly sure. But the stone seems to understand. And in that moment, so do you. This was never about Kerm. It was about how you walked. Who you walked with. The noticing. The naming. The laughing. The silence. The space you left in yourself for the hum to settle in. You walk back to camp, slower now. You're not the same shape you were when this started. And you never will be again. You spend your last evening with the others wrapped in shared quiet. No dramatic goodbyes. No ceremonial declarations. Just a warmth that hangs between you like steam from a cup of tea. Gentle, invisible, unmistakably there. Odin is carving something into a stick. Not runes, not letters. Just shapes that feel right. Loki is teaching the goat to wink. It goes about as well as you'd expect. Freya is plucking petals from a flower and assigning them oddly specific tasks. This one is for calming thunderstorms. This one reminds dreams to be on time. You sit back and let the firelight flicker on your face. The stars overhead shimmer like a soft lullaby caught in crystal. You feel different. Not louder. Not wiser. Just quieter inside. Settled. Like someone who has finally finished a long sentence and doesn't need to rush into the next. Freya breaks the silence. What would you name this moment? You consider it. The pause between heartbeats. She nods. Perfect. Loki raises a toast with his last apple. To Kerm, who didn't move. It didn't need to. Odin smiles. May all our most important stories be this boring. You all laugh. Not loudly, not boisterously. Just enough to nudge the night forward. Later, as you prepare to sleep, you walk a few paces from camp, sit under a tree that might be older than memory, and listen. The hum is there. Faint, content, curled up like a cat in your chest. Not asking anything. Not demanding meaning. Just being. And you let it be. The wind sighs. The trees lean in. Somewhere, a rock keeps being a rock. And you gently fall asleep. So now, as the last stars blink down at you like tired storytellers closing their eyes, you let your breath slow. Just a little deeper, just a little softer. There's no more journey to take tonight. No riddles left to answer, no gods left to outweep, no ancient rocks left to rename. Just this moment. This stillness. You feel the weight of every step you took, every odd laugh you shared with a trickster, every thoughtful glance exchanged with a goat who may or may not be sacred. They've all settled gently into you, like dust in moonlight, like moss growing in the quiet. There's nothing you need to hold on to now. Let the stories drift. Let the questions float. Let even the hum fade if it wants to, because you've already heard what you needed. And somehow it has heard you. The trees cradle you in silence. The earth holds you without asking why. And somewhere out there, Kerm continues not to move. And isn't that the most comforting thing of all? You don't need a moral. You don't need a map. You just need rest. Let your limbs soften. Let your thoughts stretch out and dissolve like morning fog. You're safe. You're still. You're home, even if only inside this moment. And as your eyes close and your breath deepens, remember, the best myths aren't the ones that end. They're the ones that stay with you, quietly humming, long after the story is done. Sleep well, dream gently, and may you always find the silence between the stars.